We're joined now by a true pioneer and distinguished leader in the space community, Dr. Kathryn Sullivan, who was one of the first 6 women to join the NASA Astronaut Corps in 1978 and holds the distinction of being the first American woman to walk in space. Her submersible dive in the Challenger Deep of the Pacific Ocean this past June made her the first person to both orbit the planet and reach its deepest point, as well as the first woman to dive to full ocean depth. She's an astronaut, scientist, explorer, a government executive, having served as NOAA administrator, as well as a successful author. Dr. Sullivan, thank you for joining Space Foundation and our State of Space 2021 program today.
Great to be with you, Rich.
From your perspective and experience as both an astronaut, a scientist, and administrator for NOAA, how do you see the state of space in 2021 for civil space?
Yeah, it's a fascinating question. So much going on. And, I think I have 2 threads shape my view here. One is sort of a Dickensian thread of it's sort of the best of times, worst of times set of tensions. And the other is my root and my passion professionally, and really the big motivation for my wanting to fly in space is all about geography and the earth sciences and the chance to understand and see the Earth from space with my own eyes. And so a big part of when I think about civil space going forward has to do with looking at the Earth from space. So let me just dive a little deeper into both of those. On the exciting side, we're in what a vibrant era we're living through right now. There's so many new entrants, different companies, different non-governmental entities, different nations, getting into the space business, into the space frontier, space exploration. There's new technology, new financing mechanisms coming along. So it's this wonderfully frothy, fluid kind of creative time. And the earth sciences vein, I'm particularly intrigued about the shrinking of sensors, key sensors that are really vital to our monitoring and keeping the pulse of this planet, to get synthetic aperture radar instruments down to sizes that perhaps could actually fly on CubeSats or at least smaller satellites than heretofore, that can open up so many interesting avenues for exploration, understanding, mapping, monitoring. On the other hand, I fret as an earth scientist about the continuity of some of the fundamental data streams that have become vital to our economy and to public safety. I'm not talking about images from orbit, which you can have an array of purposes and interested parties, but very esoteric measurements, profiles of the distribution of moisture and heat through the atmosphere, vertical profiles. That is the sine qua non, that's the fuel for weather forecasting and for climate outlooks. There isn't currently, and I can't imagine that someday there will be genuinely a mass market of demand for buying a column of measurements right above my head of the temperature and relative humidity as a function of height. It's been, up until this point in our history, always predominantly the province of national governments to make those measurements. And there's been a regime of national governments working together to share whatever measurements they make of the atmosphere, because no one can make as many measurements as is needed to make a good weather forecast. So that's the regime that we came into the 21st century with, and it has served the economy and our countries and our security very well. How might that change going forward? I don't know. It's certainly conceivable that there are equally good or maybe even better regimes for data acquisition or data sharing and selling going forward. But I worry about sustaining the continuity of some of those really non-marketable data streams that are vital to everyone and yet become a bit ambiguous in this new regime. We really kind of need a new regime on multiple fronts. How are you going to handle, how should new entrants behave in the space arena? Who are they? Are they accountable to anybody other than their funders? What will happen with what are now a global data commons? Will that change to a fully commercial arrangement or some mixed arrangement? I don't know any of these answers, but I know the value and importance of our ability to keep the pulse of our planet and the absolute centrality of space-based observing to our ability to do that. And so what I watch most carefully is in both the policy and the commercial arena is how might this be going forward? And will we find a way that we can essentially do a make before break, like a mountaineer or like an astronaut on a spacewalk, get firm hold of the next before we let go of the grip we had before, because there's so much in the way of public safety, general well-being, and economic vitality that hinges on our ability to do that.
So with all of those challenges that you detailed, what area of civil space do you think needs the most attention and investment so it can better succeed in 2021?
Well, I would put my finger right on that question of, what is this new regime that we're making our way into? What are the principles that will guide and govern the behavior of countries, of private parties, of non-governmental entities, of a university that can put a small sat into orbit? This gets down to things like space traffic management, who's going to help deconflict, who's going to help ensure we're tracking and monitoring so we know when somebody is about to bump another person, whose obligation is it to maneuver. We may be on the verge of an era in which servicing satellites in orbit to extend their life is feasible robotically. How are we going to deal with that? If it's my satellite and something suddenly is coming close to me, what exchange of information or signals, either satellite to satellite or entity to entity, how do I know you're a good guy coming to help me and not a bad guy, maybe coming to hurt me? What will become of what has been a common data pool? I mean, a massive data lake of the most fundamental observations about the natural state of our planet, that everyone from a college student to a national government to an entrepreneur with the coolest idea for a new startup company can dip into and create more value. How will that morph? Will it remain an open data commons, free sharing of the ones and zeros, and build your business, make your income on top of that? Or will we start to monetize the ones and zeros and sell or require licenses for the raw data? Spectrum is another key issue. Again, in particular for operating in and around the Earth and observing the Earth. Our atmosphere is opaque to many wavelengths and to some of the most significant wavelengths from an Earth observation and satellite control point of view. So those finite windows where you can get data and signals back and forth from the Earth to orbit, we're wrestling with a new real estate problem. Up until a few years ago, there were maybe 10 players that wanted to make use of those spectral windows. Now suddenly there are a burgeoning number of users. And all of our 5G phones potentially want to connect through space-based connectivity. How does that all interact? How do we deal with this new real estate problem of how many people want to move in and use those few fixed bits of the atmosphere that let electromagnetic radiation get through? And, on this front, there's clearly also a beyond Earth dimension that's becoming quite critical, with more and more countries mounting missions to the moon, or at least stating their intentions to the moon and even to Mars. The old treaty regimes of the late 50s with their updates in the 70s, do they continue to hold? How will governments and companies proceed if they believe they're going to mine resources? Everything about ownership, access rights, usage rights, claimancy. There's a whole new domain in the beyond Earth arena that we're going to have to sort out. And it's still more than a little bit Wild West, and certainly not clear to me how that all will fall out over the next several years. But what I would say in summary of all of that is why I would put my finger first and foremost on this is what to focus on is because everybody's prospect of success in any of the endeavors that I've touched on improves if we can get some clarity and stability and certainty around what are my obligations, what are my rules, what are my allowances. Everyone fares better on clearer ground.
I was fascinated at how you describe it as real estate. And I think that is probably one of the most apt descriptors that I think most people can really get their heads around. And with that real estate, we've now got a new administration and a new Congress that have taken their terms of office. And I'm curious what you think they need to know to make civil space, and I'll use your description, real estate, a successful place to operate going forward.
Well, I'm confident the new administration's gotten very good initial grounding and initial sketching of these key pivotal issues. For the United States, how are we going to deal with space traffic management? Again, with so many more entrants coming into the space arena, the old approach of the Defense Department, specifically the Air Force, taking charge of tracking things we care about in orbit and letting anybody know when something is getting too close. There was a lot of military usage of space and a small bit of civilian usage. So it made good sense for the Air Force to take that charge and just help the civilian users on the side. That's flipping the other way around now. The bulk of the activity is moving towards civil, and the growth rate is projected to be substantially on the civil side. So the Air Force is not in the business of providing customer service to civilian entities, nor should it be. So where are we going to move that function to, and where are we going to establish genuinely adequate technical capacity and policy guidance to make sure that works successfully? There's been a debate over many, many years whether it should go to Federal Aviation Administration or the Department of Commerce. You can make an argument for or against either one of those, and you'll have it, some things easier and some things harder, depending which of those roads you go down. But what I would say, and I'm confident the new administration is hearing this message loud and clear, is what's important now is that we stop dithering about which and pick one and make it work. That's true on space traffic management. I think it's true on, again, in the United States, it's true on the spectrum matter. The responsibilities for spectrum allocation and management are scattered across several different pieces of the executive branch in our country. So there's some mismatch and left-hand, right-hand problems that have complicated the situation. It's time to get that in hand. I mean, any of the ubiquitous internet constellations, at least one of which is already in the process of launching significant batches of satellites. The consequences of saturating those bits of real estate with 5G commercial cell signals is pretty significant on the GPS system. It's very significant on our weather satellite system because they're living in that same real estate, and it's not hard to swamp these signals. One of the most important measurements we make from orbit that is vital to weather forecasting is a very, very, very weak, low signal to noise microwave measurement, be readily swamped by intense 5G radiation in that same band. And then, so I think that's really the key thing for the new regime to get out in front of right away is get the table set more clearly, get some of these ambiguous issues of traffic management, spectrum management clarified so everyone knows what they've got to deal with and how to move forward to advance their mission or advance their business.
Well, their to-do list is certainly not short. And there's an awful lot of activity that they've all got to weigh in on. But I am curious, as you look to the new year that we're in 2021, what's the civil space mission that you're most looking forward to seeing?
Well, planetary geology kind of person that I am, I'm just thrilled to look at the veritable armada of missions that's set to head off towards Mars. And 2021, we'll just see their departure, won't see the arrivals or the landings or, fingers crossed, the first flight of a helicopter on Mars. But there are just some fabulously fun, daring, challenging mission objectives that the different satellites in that armada are going to undertake. So I'll be watching that with bated breath and following them all the way on the transit out and as they arrive. And of course, I'm officially a member of Team Hubble, having been on the shuttle mission that put the Hubble Space Telescope in orbit. You can see that just over my shoulder there behind me. It's been a long road from Hubble to the James Webb Space Telescope, but that critter now exists and is pretty well past all of its testing and about ready to get folded up and buttoned up and put on top of a booster and sent out to the Lagrange point. I'm not up to speed fully on the science, all of the science that James Webb will be able to do. But the first scientific satellite to operate, really complex scientific satellite to operate at the Lagrange point, it's super cold. You can get on those detectors peering further into the infrared, and just the technical challenge of making all of those mirrors deploy into perfectly shaped concave array, and the sun shield all unfold and protect it all. That's just spectacular marvel of automation and engineering that I'm sure everyone who knows anything about it will be on pins and needles come arrival and deploy day for James Webb.
Exactly. And there's a lot to look forward to there. Dr. Sullivan, thank you for your time and expertise and sharing it with us today. All of us at Space Foundation are grateful for the work and public service that you have given to all of us and what you continue to do to educate people on space, our environment, earth science, and so much more. Thank you very much for joining us.
My pleasure, Rich. Have a great day.
Thank you. We'll be back in a moment with more shared perspectives for our State of Space 2021 program.